Any people who just joined, we're just waiting a few more minutes to let people in, and we'll get going. Hi, Ewan.
Hi there, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
All good, thank you. Enjoying the weather?
Yeah, I know, it's lovely, isn't it? A bit cooler now, which is great. I feel like all we do is talk about the weather, don't we? So it's one of those things. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes, Ewan, and then I'll kick off. And Jamie's got all of our slides ready to go, so not long.
No problem.
Perfect. Sam, if you maybe give me the nod when you think we're good to go. I know Sam's in control of the.
Hello. A few people still coming in, but we are up to 20. If you want to maybe start doing intros, and I'll keep letting people in.
Yes, perfect. Lovely. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you, Sam. Welcome everyone to another Chrome Core Kill event. We are talking about everything crisis management today. So this is quite an interactive session. We do really want your thoughts and questions, etc. I'll be handing over to Jamie Smith and Ewan Keen. Ewan's here from a legal perspective, and we'll be holding a bit of a Q&A at the end for anyone that has any questions. But if you wanted to ask anything specific, either pop it in the chat or just discuss it at the end. But over to you, Jamie, and I'll let you guys do your intros.
Oh, thank you so much. I will share my screen, so hopefully this is going to work seamlessly because I know what I'm like sometimes with technology. So as Abby has already said, today we're here to talk about navigating workplace crisis, but a little bit of an introduction from me first. So hello, I'm Jamie. I am the People and Ops Director at Talent Recruitment Group. One of our brands is Chrome Core Kill, which is why I'm here today. So I look after all things from a kind of HR and people perspective, as well as from an operations perspective across our group. So a little bit more about me. I am a chartered fellow of the CIPD. I'm level 7 qualified, and I am also an accredited coach. I've not got any formal crisis qualifications, but I have been in a few crises in my time. So hopefully today I can impart some pearls of wisdom and also just get that conversation started in the room with you all. On that, I will hand over to Ewan.
Thank you very much. I am an employment solicitor by specialism, a partner at Simons, Muirhead and Burton Solicitors, and we're partnering up with Chrome Core Kill today to give a legal perspective, but hopefully a commercial legal perspective, not one that just says on the one hand this or on the other hand that and leaves people none the wiser, as I know sometimes solicitors are prone to do. So here to have a legal but hopefully commercial and practical perspective on the topics that you will hopefully all be raising today. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Brilliant. So I have pulled together some slides just to kind of help with some talking points. But equally, if you kind of feel you want to say anything as we go through, feel free to shout it out, answer any questions, or just pop things in the chat as well. So the first slide for me really is, well, what is a crisis? So I think for most people, when you think about a workplace crisis, some might go, oh, that's a fire, it's a flood, it's a cyber incident, it's a huge PR case. But actually, the reality is crises are different for most businesses. And the way that I see it, it's actually anything that threatens our people, your operations, or your reputation. So I actually think that list is a lot longer than maybe some of those traditional crises we think of are kind of natural disasters. So on my next slide, I've kind of got a few different things that I think could be a crisis. And again, this will be different for businesses, whether you're a small business, large business, I think they'll have a different application. But here's a few things that I think could be seen as a crisis. And so I'll give everyone a little second to read those. And then ask, is anyone surprised by anything that's on that list, or potentially even think anything's missing? I can also take silence as Jamie, 10 out of 10, you've got it completely right. I can do that. I suppose I can give a perspective from my side, one that I'd probably not necessarily thought about so much. was employee death. And it was a big one that came to me. So I worked in adult health and social care during the COVID pandemic, and actually that was a real crisis for our business. So that was one that I'd not necessarily saw or thought about before. And I think I just saw one in the chat then from someone. Lucy, death of an owner or a key partner. Absolutely, that can really turn a business on its head. You've got to deal with the emotions of not only your internal employees, but think of your supply network, customers, clients, everyone. If you've got a key person in your business that unfortunately dies, that can have a massive impact on your business from all angles. That's a great one. Anything else for anybody else?
There's one that I can add, and as a lawyer, it's often you think of litigation. So if you're an organisation and you're suffering litigation, whether it be employment related or personal injury or a breach of contract, that's obviously quite often seen as a crisis for the people involved. And also in terms of in relation to an employee death, unfortunately, it's not uncommon for myself and my colleagues to be advising employers where an employee is threatening suicide or harm. So unfortunately, that is also quite often a crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're definitely the tough ones, and it's about having the right things in place to be prepared for those. And that's jump into some of my slides a little bit later on, but definitely hold that thought for now. So in any of these situations, or even ones that are potentially going to have an impact on your business, I think a good question to ask yourself is, well, actually, where do we start? And I've got two questions to ask the room, so feel free to shout out or just pop them in the chat. One for me, straight off the bat, is how many here have a business continuity plan? Even I'm not raising my hand here because I'm half raising it because I'm half have one, half guilty that we don't have one. So I'll half.
Can I half raise it as well then?
You can half raise it as well. You half have one. Some are better than some parts of our continuity plan are better than others. And don't worry if you're feeling guilty and going, I've never even heard.
Oh, you've got one. There you go. Start performing.
The second question then, so actually some people might be going, what even is a business continuity plan? And you know what, a few years ago I just said the same thing. But my second question then is, if you actually have one, how many of you have rehearsed it in the last 12 months? Now, if you're anything like me, you can spend a lot of time, effort and energy on curating the most perfect plan, and all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, and it's beautiful. But if nobody knows about it and nobody knows where it lives, nobody actually knows what to do in the event of a crisis. It happens. Has anyone else done a piece of work where they've done that and then it gets, by accident or on purpose, filed away forever and never sees the light of day again? It's one of my worst things, actually. I should just go back and look at the work I made 12 months ago, and it's probably a good starting point for my 2027 plan.
I've in the past had a client that was a sports club, and they had a very good plan and process in place for first aid, and spent a lot of money and effort and took very seriously training their staff. They had a very good process on training people on using defibrillators, and then they forgot to tell everyone where the defibrillators were and how to access them. And on one occasion, when unfortunately it was needed at a sporting event, none of the first aiders were there and no one else knew anything about the plan. So that was a classic example where it was a great plan and great intent, but it wasn't actually put into practice.
These I've A, heard that story before, and B, also been guilty of that myself. I think it's really easy to go, I've got the perfect plan, and sometimes it even makes sense to us, but if you don't actually test it or check in on it, it can really fall apart when you actually do need it. So I wanted to introduce a little bit of an idea, and this has kind of been a bit of my guiding compass when thinking about crisis management, and it's the 3 C's. So the first one for me is around clarity. So a couple of questions to ask yourself is, who is leading the charge on whatever happens? So in the event of a crisis, who is it? Is it the CEO? Is it the HR director? Is it the legal team? Is it marketing? Who is that? If you don't know who that is, that's the first thing to answer, because you need to make sure that there is a single point of contact that is taking the lead. Who then makes the decisions? Is it one person? Is it a team of people? Is it a diverse group from across the business? Is it a leadership team? what does that actually look like? Next up is who leads communication. So that's internal and external. So it might actually be two people in partnership. It's one of my next things. Communication is actually sometimes where this falls down. Then it's thinking about who liaises with legal. I'm sure Ewan can tell you it's very important to get ahead with legal and get them in as soon as possible so you can have that aligned, consistent plan and make sure everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. And then up again, who manages employees? A core part of this is them kind of asking what's going on and what's happening. You don't want to leave your team in the dark. And again, who speaks externally? So if people don't know who's in charge, that's where things can really spiral out of control quite quickly, because as people go to different people, they'll say, I don't know, I don't have the answers, and confidence can get eroded very, very quickly. Whereas if you've got the dedicated points of contact, you know who's doing what, it's really easy then to keep everyone on the same page. My second C, I've kind of already alluded to it already, is then communication. So from my perspective, most of the damage actually comes from poor communication, not necessarily the crisis itself. Obviously, depending on the crisis that we are talking about, but actually poorly handled communication can send everyone in a tailspin if you don't get it right. So questions I'd say is, what are we saying? Who are we saying it to? When are we saying it? And what are we deliberately not saying? There is, again, a nuance here of being open and transparent, but also in saying the right thing at the right time. And I'm sure Ewan can definitely back me up on that one. I know sometimes you will want to be open and transparent, but there's a right time and place to say certain things. And then last but not least is consistency. So keeping that one version of events. I think that's really important. Like I said earlier, speaking to legal early on, speaking with marketing or whoever's dealing with communication, it's really important that one version of events is going out, because if you say one thing to your employees and then say one thing to your customers, those two do speak, and it will come up and it'll become very apparent very quickly there's two different versions of the truth. And actually that's where the trust and confidence gets eroded in a crisis. And actually trust and confidence is really the only thing that you can use to drive people through it. So like I say, you don't want HR saying one thing, legal saying another, managers saying another, and CEO saying another. It just causes you a whole host of problems. Before I go into my next slide, does anyone have any questions on the 3 C's? Or hopefully I'm not teaching anyone to suck eggs here, but I think it's quite a nice guiding set of principles and an easy one to remember.
There's one thing I might add, if I may, Jamie. I think there's often a tendency when looking at the clarity, the communication, and the consistency to rush to communication, and it's very tempting. But I think it's often worth a pause so that we are speaking to the right people and getting the right people in the chain, so that when we then communicate and when the matter develops, we at that point know who is the right person to take over, and we've got our consistency. So I think, tempting though it is in a crisis, is to rush to communication. That's the second C for a reason.
Yep, absolutely agree. Yeah, sometimes you can do more damage early on if you don't consider that part. I always think, put yourself in the shoes of who's receiving the communication. Actually, what would they think? And it gives you a nice guiding principle to go, actually, does it make sense right now? Real. So the big bit that I would obviously talk about is the people's perspective. So your people, usually, I've kind of loosely alluded to this already, but a lot of employees in a crisis will think, again, dependent on the crisis, but am I safe? Am I effective? What's going to happen next? And can I trust my leadership team to get me through this? And that's what's really important. Like I say, is the trust and confidence. And I've put a nice little line on there. Not everyone is expecting everyone to have all the answers all the time. You can't. And again, depending on the crisis, sometimes it is totally new for the business or the business leaders. Not every CEO will have dealt with, a death or a cyber incident or a loss of power or any of that kind of stuff. There's not necessarily going to be that experience, but what they can do is give the confidence that they are navigating through it, keeping people informed where appropriate, and making the decisions. So I just wondered for the room, I've got an example that I want to share next, but has anyone ever seen the kind of employee part handled well by a leader that they'd be comfortable to share? Or even in general crisis, handled times. do not worry if you've not, because I came prepared earlier with an example. So hopefully I might just need to change my screen share so I can share with sound. So let me just turn off 1 second. Let me move this over here. So I think I just saw someone put something in the chat. So from Anne-Marie, yes, it's all about communication and trust. 100% agree with you. And this is one I think was done well. So let me just try and put the screen share back on and do sound. So my sound will cut off when I share this video. So let me just share that and I will play it.
For giving me the opportunity to chat with you first on air. And I want to start with saying we're deeply sorry for we're resolved. We identified this very quickly and remediated the issue. And as systems come back online, as they're rebooted, they're coming up and they're working. And now we are working with each and every customer to make sure that we can bring them back online. But that was the extent of the issue in terms of a bug that was related to our update. Well, yeah, first and foremost, again, just to reinforce what you said, it wasn't a cyber attack. You know, it was related to this this content update. And as you might imagine, we've been on, you know, with our customers all night and working with them. Many of the customers are rebooting the system and it's coming up and it'll be operational because of, you know, we fixed it on our end. And some of the systems that aren't recovering, we're working with them. So it could be some time for some systems that just automatically won't recover. But it is, you know, it is our mission, is why we're here, to make sure that every customer is fully recovered, and we're not going to relent until we get every customer back to where they were, and we continue to protect them and keep the bad guys out of their systems. Well, when you look at software, it is a very complex world, and there's a lot of interactions, and always staying ahead of the adversary is certainly you know, a tall task. So these sort of things, obviously, you know, you try to understand and mitigate them. And in some cases, you have a weird interaction, and it didn't seem like it happened on every Windows system. There's different versions and flavors and patch levels, if you will, and we're just trying to sort out where that negative interaction was. And again, that's what we're focused on, getting customers back up and running.
In there for a little second. Hopefully I am back. I had my own little technology crisis there where everything stopped working for me. My screens went black. So hopefully everyone.
You are back, Jamie. It's okay.
Fabulous. Good. So I don't know if anyone remembers who that is, but that is George Cutts. So it was 2024. I'm sure we all remember the CrowdStrike scandal where they deployed a system update and it pretty much knocked everything around the world offline. Which I don't think we'd ever seen anything much the like of that before. But I thought that was a really good example of seeing, it kind of someone getting in front of a crisis and being quite transparent and open really early, and just jumping ahead of it. I don't know if anyone has any kind of thoughts on that video or even remembering CrowdStrike and what happened. I am going to apologise because I actually currently can't see anyone, so I'm just talking.
I'll keep the chat open, Jamie, just in case anyone pops anything on there.
Oh, so let me just try and move my screens around. So everything just went a little bit dark now for me. But hopefully my slides are still working. So yeah, for me, what I thought worked really, really well, especially in the CrowdStrike example, they didn't wait around before communicating. I think, you know, going back to Ewan's point a little bit earlier, I think they were quick to communicate, but they were very thoughtful in the way that they did it and what they were actually sharing. I did also like that they also very quickly dismissed that it would be a cyber incident, because I think that was a big thing for probably their employees, also their customers, and then around the world. I think that was a big worry, so they dispelled that very, very quickly. I think another thing that was really good was actually the accountability. So it was George Cutts that really became the face of this, and held hands up and went, look, we've made a mistake, we've got it wrong, and actually this is what we're doing to fix it. And that's, I think, a really good thing that happened. I'm not sure if anyone here has worked in health and social care before, or even the NHS. They have something called the duty of candour, and effectively pulling it all down from what it actually means. It's when something goes wrong, you put your hands up and go, this is it, this is the fix, and this is how we actually make sure it's not going to happen again. And that's something that I think was done really, really well here. And then last but not least, it was also the transparency. So it wasn't necessarily focusing on the PR of going, oh, we can't admit we made a mistake. And I don't know if anyone works for an American business or has done. I find they're quite aware of litigation and don't necessarily want to say anything. But that didn't really happen in this example. It was a focus on honesty, and it was balanced with that risk. So I thought that actually went quite in their favour.
Mm. Jamie, would you say it's best to wait if you don't know all the facts at the beginning, but obviously if you are quite conscious of timing, that you do want to get something out and deal with something, but could it potentially be more damaging if you don't know all the facts straight away?
Yes, I would say so, but it depends on the intentionality behind what you're doing. So I think sometimes it's better to say, we're aware that something's happened, we're taking stock internally right now, we'll communicate as soon as we can. It's a double-edged sword though, because some people could say, well, you actually just don't know what's happening if that's the communication. I think it's about gauging what the specific incident is, and the impact. I think it is worth not sitting on it for too long, because again, people will fill the silence with their own stories, and I'm sure we've got many people on the call. Silence usually gets filled by answers that are totally wild and you would never have made up in a million years. So sometimes a holding message can be quite powerful, but it's a balance. Okay. I think Ewan's got a different perspective on that.
Yeah, I think all I'd add to that is going back to your slide about clarity and communication, because I think in the example you gave, they were rightly quick and could be quick because they were able to establish quickly it wasn't a bug. So they were able to say, our mistake, and whilst the services have fallen over, there's no damage beyond that, and we will get back to where we can. Whereas if there's a bug, you've got to be a bit more cautious about. You won't know for a while how far that spread, what damages it's caused, if it's affected other people's systems. So if you've got the commercial team, the legal team, and the PR team sitting down together, I think you can quickly establish, is this one where we can get out straight away and be very candid about it? Is this one where we can say we're aware we're working on it, or do we need to sit tight until we've got all the facts because we don't want to admit liability, or even give people a sense of calm and everything's okay, when actually if they went back into their systems there might be a bug and it can make things worse. So there's no easy answer to that one, but it goes back to the preparation and continuity planning and crisis management, where you have the key people around the table making the decision as quickly as practicable.
Yeah. Thanks. So I think my screen sharing stopped for a moment there, but I think it's now back. So I had a kind of bit of a question. Again, feel free to jump in if you so wish, or maybe even just take a little moment to reflect on this. I wanted to ask, if a major crisis happened at 3 o'clock today, and touch wood it doesn't, hopefully it doesn't, do you know in your business who would lead the response? Would it be you? Would it be someone else? Would it be COO, marketing? Like I said, would you get in touch with legal? Who would brief your employees? Would you speak to customers? And so let's see, to Ewan's point, if you have the facts, do you need to wait to do a little bit more? Do you need to communicate something to the media if it's such a big event? And actually, who would make decisions if the CEO wasn't available? That's quite a touchy question for me, because actually our CEO is currently on holiday, so I think actually the lead response is currently me at the moment in our business, which is quite good. So it's for me at 3 o'clock today. And you don't have to answer these questions, but do people know who the answers to these questions are? Yes, no, maybe? So if you don't know, maybe it's one task. I think it'd probably be me, but we've never discussed it. Yeah, Lucy, I know that one. Luckily, I have discussed it. But yeah, usually these things fall to people. But it's a good one to answer as well, because the worst thing is as well, in a crisis, actually, sometimes we want to do the right thing, so we will try and jump ahead and get ahead of it. But actually, if two people have the same thought and you've not necessarily discussed who is doing that, what you wouldn't want to happen is you go out and start communicating and someone else does at the same time. And if there is a conflict of message, that can be quite tough too. So yeah, definitely recommend, if you've even got like a leadership team channel or in your next board or whatever that looks like, maybe just drop the questions in and go, I've just been on this webinar and actually quick thought, if something happens, who is doing that? Like, great point, Kate, like, is it managing director or chairman? Like, who would it be? And then also actually, if that person's not available, who's second in line? Who would that authority be delegated to? I think it's really good just to have that, if nothing else, because A, then that person knows, and B, then you as a leadership team also do know. If person A is not available, then it's definitely person B, and we know who that is. Perfect. So you'll be pleased to know I'm getting to the end of my slides before we open the floor to any questions. But just in closing for me, and again, Ewan, feel free to kind of jump in and add anything into this. For me, crisis management actually starts way before the crisis actually happens. And it's not necessarily about having, the biggest and best systems or, biggest and best legal teams. It's actually just about thinking ahead and having a plan and everyone actually knowing what the plan is. So I think it's not about going, oh my God, this has happened, panic stations, let's get everyone in a room. We've already had that conversation and thought about it. Those people, when they get in that room, actually know what they need to do, know who's communicating, and know exactly what's going on. So say in your business, if you don't necessarily know that right now, I think it could be a really interesting topic for your next leadership team meeting, or for your next board meeting, or even something just to bring up if you've got like engagement surveys or even pulse surveys, just to go, actually, I'm not sure what we would do in the event of something going wrong. How do we communicate that to our people in our business? I'm not sure if you've got anything else you'd like to add on that, Ewan.
Yeah, I think for me, it's often a case that people think it must be one person. It must be the MD. It must be the CEO. I think often it's a case of making the wider working environment aware of people's responsibilities. So if you are very clear in your organisation who your data protection officer is, if it's a GDPR, a data breach issue, you're going to know to go to them first. And they're going to know, is this something that is not a problem? Do I have to raise it as a data protection officer? I'll know who to go to. Equally, if you've got in place marketing and PR people, then if you're worried that something's coming down the line or you've seen something on social media, you'd go to them and they would know whether it's something to escalate. And equally, if you've got in-house counsel and you think there's a potential threat. So I think often it's having almost a diagram that the business is aware of. Yes, here's the main person you contact if there's any crisis and you're just not sure. But otherwise, it's this person's the data protection officer, this person is the PR person, this person is the legal person. And I think that means that you're much more likely to know who to go to, first of all, not have a crisis develop if it's not a crisis. And if it is a crisis, have all the right people plugged in and doing the right things in the most quickest way.
Yeah, massively agree. And actually, I really like there as well, like kind of differentiation of the strands of different crises. It'll also be different in every business. But yeah, different people should absolutely deal with different things. So there's not a one size fits all approach. For some people, depending on the crisis, it could be one person would manage multiple. And again, the businesses it might be, you can kind of break them down almost into swim lane styles of accountability, which I think is a really good shout. It's all about the context of your organisation. Really. Well, everyone, you'll be pleased to know that brings me to the end of my slides. So I will stop sharing there and just kind of open the floor if anyone has any specific questions. I think, Abby, you may have said...
Yeah,
there's a few...
we've got... Yeah, I popped it on the chat just so people can see it, but basically we've had some questions in. It'd be good to know the latest guidance legal framework disciplinary action is on mild but disruptive antisocial behaviour by individuals in an office.
Yeah, I suppose I can answer first, then you, if you wanted to jump on that, feel free to add anything to mine. I suppose from a legal framework / disciplinary action for antisocial behaviour, I think for me, I would first of all treat it as a conduct issue. So I would look to understand what's going on. get the manager to speak to the person, give the feedback as well. For me, it's about understanding what the root cause of this is. And again, depending on the severity, depends on the avenues that I go here. But as it says mild, I'll assume mild. I quite like the EEC framework of feedback. I'm not sure if anyone's come across that, but it's example, effect, change or continue. So if you use it in this example for something constructive, you could say, as an example, when you're, when you don't look at people when you speak to them, the effect is people actually think you're being rude and dismissive. So what I need you to change going forward is, make sure you're involved in the conversation. That's a bit of a weak example, but one straight off the top of my head. That could then help them understand the behaviour. So I would focus more on the behaviour rather than personality. Again, depending on the person, there could be some sets of characteristics and reasonable adjustments you need to think about. So I'd look first to understand what the root cause of the issue is, give the feedback, make sure that it is documented. Then if there is no change, it could then potentially go to a formal conduct process, which then lead to disciplinary hearings and progressively potentially go from a first, final, all the way up to potential dismissal. I would look first to understand what's going on, find the root cause, fix that, and put any adjustments in place. I don't know if there's anything else you'd add there, Ewan.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think in issues such as this, and obviously I know reference to mild, if it's serious, if it's racial, sexual harassment, it's pretty obvious it's that kind of thing. And of course, we're going straight to disciplinary. But in the way you've described it, I think my driver would be to encourage the next closest level of line management to sit down with both of them, and initially separately, and say, or all of them, depending on how many people are involved. So where the complaints arisen from, where the concerns have arisen from, let's get that person or those people's point of view. We then go to the person that's allegedly being disruptive, and again, nearest line manager wherever possible, get their point of view. So at that early stage, it's not formal, it's not progressed, it's someone trying to understand the context. And it might be that a simple arrangement or rearrangement of the working environment. It might be understanding that perhaps someone has a particular impairment or a need, and maybe they find it difficult to work in an environment or within social conventions that we think are normal. So it's understanding the situation, seeing if there can be an on-the-ground resolution, having a clear message as to what acceptable behaviour or changed working environment looks like. And then obviously that doesn't work, then one is looking at either a capability or a conduct issue, depending on the source of the issues raised.
Well, thank you.
I've got another question on here. So it's a bit of a talking point. Where do HR and legal teams most commonly disagree during a crisis?
Oh, question. I can't think of a time where I have had a big disagreement. Maybe you'll have an example, Ewan, but I think for me, we're usually quite aligned. I suppose the only time I would see where there is a potential disagreement or conflict is probably around the transparency piece. So from a people perspective, I probably want to be quite transparent early on. To Ewan's point earlier, actually, if I don't know all the facts, I actually probably need to be reined in a little bit by someone from legal to go, hang on, we're not ready yet. Let's actually just think this through. But that's the only example that springs to mind for me. I usually say we're quite aligned. I don't know if you've got any examples, Ewan, that you've come across.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally HR and legal are very aligned, particularly if you're going to an employment specialist rather than someone general, because the two different streams of the same thing are usually aligned. It's about how do you manage your people, and how do you have a good working environment, and how do you get productivity, how do you have people enjoying the work environment as much as possible, how do you try and remove or mitigate against liability. So we are normally aligned, and I have to say it's quite unusual to have a disagreement. But I guess if I've got to point out where there are disagreements, I think it's often outcome. You might have someone come to their lawyer and say, this is the situation, this is what we want. And the lawyer may have to say, well, actually, that's a bit difficult because the law isn't aligned there. But again, I think if you've got experience and commerciality, you can usually say, however, if I'm right in saying this is where you want to get to, we can probably still do that. We just do it in a slightly different way. So I would say rather than disagreement, it's usually a good discussion and a workaround.
Very diplomatic answer, Ewan, like that. Does anyone have any other questions? I appreciate some, these things, sometimes people don't want to say things in an open forum, so you can always follow up with any questions if you have any later on. Is there anything, Jamie or Ewan, you'd like to add? Any other talking points?
What that springs to mind for me, I suppose, like I said, if I was to say everyone, the one golden nugget to take away, just say think about your organisation and crisis in the context of your organisation, and just having that plan.
Yeah, and I think from an employment law perspective, particularly, it's being aware of the risk and the liability. It often employers do what they genuinely think is the right thing, but there's just been a miscommunication with the individual, and by the time they try and sort it out, bridges have been burnt, and there's a loss of trust, and it escalates more than it needs to. So I think the keeping initial issues as close to the ground as possible, with the immediate line manager, someone that knows the working environment, knows the team, trying to sort out crises that way. The only other thing I'd say is as people leaders and leaders of a business, is keeping in touch with the legislation and the rules, and we've got a lot of changes now. How long someone needs to wait before they can bring a claim, how much service they have before they can bring a claim. Concentration on having to make all reasonable adjustments, not just reasonable adjustments, to prevent harassment and third sexual harassment and third party harassment. So it's staying on top of things that you can look ahead and say, right, do we think this would affect us? If it does affect us, and put measures in, train staff. So preventative and common sense, I think, often helps the employment environment.
Lovely, thank you, Ewan. What we'll do is we'll send Ewan's details around to everyone that joined today. Anyway, so if you do have any follow-on questions, etc., you can reach out, and obviously you will have Jim and I will have our details on file as well. So hopefully everyone enjoyed today's session and got something out of it. Do let us know your feedback. We'd like to know what you found useful here, what you want to hear about coming up next, and the consultant will reach out to get some feedback, and hopefully have the nice rest of your day today. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.